Okay, so we've got this one here. This is from a Cambridge sample test. And it's the 3 pie charts below show the changes in annual spending by a particular UK school in 1981, 91, and 2001. So they want us to summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features, and they want us to make comparisons where relevant. Okay, so I'll give you a minute just to look over this. So very briefly, what patterns do you notice?
Teachers' salaries increase in
the insurance is increasing.
Now, be very careful. With statistics, the devil is in the details. Did teachers' salaries actually increase?
No.
Right, we don't know that. So what's some more?
Percentage?
They are not following.
Insurance is increasing.
Well, just we have to be very precise in our use of language. So we can't say that teachers' salaries increased because we have no idea if teachers' salaries actually went up or down. What do we have
Depending
to...
of a school on teacher's salary?
Sorry, one more time?
I mean, school spending on teacher's salary?
That's it.
Mm.
Teachers' salaries as a percentage of the budget changed. But the salaries themselves, we have no idea what they were. Is that difference clear?
Yeah.
Because if you say that teachers' salaries increased, that's wrong, because you don't know that. We don't know if any of this stuff increased or decreased or what the situation was. You know, insurance, for example, sometimes goes down.
But teacher's salary 40% and came up to 45. This does not mean that the spending on
It means it means as a percentage of the budget. Well, it means the percentage of the budget that was spent on teachers' salaries changed.
Yeah, only 5%.
But look, this thing doesn't tell us what their actual budget was.
Yeah.
So if they're, just as one scenario, if their budget kept increasing, right, then the spending on teachers' salaries might decrease just because the organization's budget is higher. Conversely, if the organization's budget fell, but they kept the same number of teachers on staff and the same number of hours, then the percentage on teachers' salaries would have gone up, even if the salaries themselves did not go up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to just watch the language to be very careful. You're talking about percentage of the budget spent on these items. Okay. So teachers' salaries, though, they were the largest budget item in all 3 years. What was the smallest item?
Insurance percentage.
Yes. We can lump together all salaries, and that's the majority of the budget in every year, right? If you lump together teachers' salaries and other workers' salaries, that's the majority of the budget in every single year. So that's a pattern. That's over half the budget in every year. What about furniture and equipment? Is there a pattern there?
Expenditure in 2001 compared to 1981.
Yeah, it's all over the place, right? 15, 5, 23. It's not really a pattern. What about resources like books?
It decreased in 2001.
Yeah, the percentage of the budget spent on those items decreased.
Yeah.
Well, it went up and then it went down. But again, it's not really a pattern, right? It just feels quite random. Insurance consistently went up, but it's the smallest budget item. So here's there's a couple pointers. I just want to talk about some areas where people make a lot of mistakes on this one. Increased by 8% and increased to 8% have very different meanings.
Yeah.
So we have to talk very briefly about percent versus percentage point. So all three sentences below describe the same thing. Teacher salaries increased from 40 to 50% between 1981 and 1991. So that's this thing, from 40% to 50%. What's the difference between 40 and 50%? Do you remember the formula for calculating percentage difference?
And percentage difference? Points difference?
Not percentage point, percentage difference. What's the
Yeah.
formula for calculating percentage difference? So if you got from 40 to 50%, what is the percentage increase?
25.
50 minus 40.
So the
Find the
first step is you find the difference.
It is 10.
What's the second step?
Divide the difference with the first digit.
By the different.
Yeah. Yeah. And the comparison.
So in this case, the difference is
10.
equals. So I'll put the absolute signs, 40, because the direction doesn't matter. 40 minus 50 gives you 10.
10.
Divided by
Divided by
40.
10.
So what's 10 over 40?
1/4 is equal to 25%.
25%.
All right, so it increased by, teachers' salaries increased by 25% between 1981 and 1991. Percentage point is
Yeah.
just the raw difference. That's just this step.
Salaries percentage increased.
So if you say percentage, you have to calculate.
Yeah.
If you just say percentage points, it's just the raw difference. But you have to put this word points in because it's not the same as percent.
Yeah.
Is everyone clear on this
Yeah.
or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ihan, when explaining, if we just talk about by percentage points instead exact percentage, is it all right?
You mean if you just give a rough number?
Yeah, by
Then
points.
Then you have to say roughly, approximately. Does that answer your question or are you asking something different?
No, I'm asking like throughout the exercise, if we talk with just percentage points without calculating actually by how many it got increased, is that all right? Or should we really do the calculation and on and off we have to say by this percentage that got increased and so forth?
So raw differences are not terribly useful for making comparisons. And I'll give a simple example that I've given before, but let's say employee A and employee B both get a salary increase. First one, employee A, salary goes from $10 to $15 per hour, and employee B, their salary goes from 20 to 25 per hour.
Yeah.
So in absolute terms, so when we say percentage point, this is in absolute terms. They both received $5 more per hour. So you don't get a meaningful comparison if you only use the absolute numbers.
Yeah,
If you do the calculation,
it's 50%.
this is a massive salary increase, and
Yeah.
this one is
25%.
25%.
Then there's a meaning, yeah.
Right? Employee A for them, it was worth twice as much as for B, right? Knowing how to do this reveals different patterns and comparisons in the data. When we look at insurance, especially in this example, it went from 2% to 3% to 8%. So in every year, spending on insurance represents the smallest category in the budget. But spending on insurance represented the largest increase in the budget in percent. Like if you had this kind of situation, your accountant would definitely notice. What was the percentage increase between 81 and 91 on insurance?
3%, 50.
50%.
Right, so if you only say it's 1 percentage point, that sounds like big deal, like who cares? But it's 50% increase, right? That's huge from an accounting point of view. And then what happened by 2001?
400%.
Yeah, like 300 times, like
400.
2 to 4 is double. 2 to 6 is triple. 2 to 8 is quadruple, but that's a 300% increase. Remember, when something doubles, that's 100%. Right? So this is a 300% increase, right, for insurance. So in absolute terms, teacher salaries constituted the largest percentage of the budget, but in relative terms, insurance costs saw the largest increase, 300% between 81 and 2001.
Why relative term?
Absolute terms is like the raw numbers. Okay. Relative terms refers to percentage change. Absolute terms refers to percentage point.
okay.
When they're talking about the stock market going up and down, they often use the word point. The stock market increased by a couple hundred points today. They don't say percent, they say points because of this reason.
Is it because it's difficult to calculate all the time? Why that they go by points?
Well, if it goes from right, it increased by 250 points. This is just very easy to say. You don't have to do any calculation. It's just subtraction. If you want to do the percentage change, then you have to actually do the calculation. All right, a couple vocabulary issues that come up all the time: rise and raise. I hope everyone remembers transitive and intransitive verbs. If you check your dictionary and it says VT or transitive verb, that means the verb needs to be followed by an object. Now, you don't always have to check your dictionary. You can make a very simple sentence. For example, if I say, I like, period, that doesn't mean anything, right? You have to like something. Like is a VT verb. It needs an object directly after. So rise, and the past tense rose, is an intransitive verb, which means it's not followed by an object. Raise, past tense raised, is a transitive verb, which means it is followed by an object. Right, so this might help you remember: the sorcerer raised the dead. Okay. This is an object after. The dead rose from their graves. They didn't rise something, they rose themselves from their graves. This is intransitive. This one is transitive. So raise and rise are two different things. You can also think, so if you go to the gym, for example, you raise the weight over your head. If you're doing like a shoulder press. Sorry?
Sunrise?
Well, that's a noun.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's a good example too. The sun rises at 7 a.m.
Yeah.
It doesn't rise something. It's just, it rises itself. Reduced and decreased, declined. It's a similar situation with some of these words. The store reduced its prices. You can say the store decreased its prices, but you can't say the store declined its prices. That doesn't work. Okay. You can also say prices decreased or declined by 5% last month. So the words are used differently. So reduced is a transitive verb, which means it is followed by an object. Worker salaries were initially 28% in 1981, then 22% in 1991, and further, what should this be?
Further reduced to 15. And further reduced.
Right, because you have to reduce something. We have reduced our prices for the sale.
Yeah.
But there's no object here, so this is no good. So you need to use decreased or declined in this situation.
Okay.
Other super useful vocabulary. In terms of, with respect to, with regard to. These are basically perfect synonyms, and they tell your audience which aspect or part of the whole you're focusing on. So if we're comparing cars, we could say in terms of price, car A is the cheapest. With respect to performance, car B is the fastest. With regard to fuel efficiency, car C burns the least gas. So if you don't know which transition to use, but you're changing focus to talk about a different aspect of the graph, any of these three terms work fantastic. These three you need to be using all the time for task 1. They're synonyms. So teachers' salaries.
In terms of teacher salaries.
Yes, teachers' salaries constituted, comprised, or made up half or almost half of the school's budget. Right, you can keep cycling through these words. Use one, then the second one, then the third one, and go back to the first one if you need to. Expenditure and expenditures. This is a great synonym. These are great words to use instead of the amount that was spent. So, and this is accountable, by the way. So expenditure is one expense. Teacher salaries were the single largest expenditure or expense in the budget. So these are good synonyms. Expenditures, just like expenses, it is countable. Expenditures on teachers were the single largest budget item. Here, though, you can't say expenses on teachers. The meaning is the same, but we can't use expenses. Sorry, this should be spending. The problem is that spending is uncountable. So if you change this to spending, it's going to be this needs to be
Passive, active. So was.
yeah. So it's not teachers were, it's spending was. This is not the subject, this is the subject. In the model below that we're going to see, the author focuses on, in the general overview, the contrast between salaries comprising the largest percentage of the budget, and then insurance representing the smallest percentage of the budget, but the largest percentage increase. Okay, because there's not too much that you can say about the furniture and equipment and resources, because the pattern, there is no pattern. It just looks very random. Not much you can say about it. Okay, so for our introduction, always start with the context and just paraphrase the prompt and other information from the graph. So if they give you information in the Y and X axes, if they give you information about the source, labels, headers, and then start your general overview. These both go in the introductory paragraph, and this is the main patterns you'll cover in the body paragraphs. Begin the general overview just by saying, generally speaking. It can be clearly seen that. Okay, I'll get you to write the introductory paragraph. So 2 parts, the context and the general overview. Okay, let me just copy. Oh, that's an image, so I can't paste it. Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes to do that. We're going to go through it quite quickly. Okay, so just write the introductory paragraph, 2 sentences in the chat box. Okay, good. That big spending of the budget, what would be more precise?
I was writing chunk, but I didn't because I think it is Oxford English, so that's what a big chunk of the budget.
The largest percentage. Right, that's more specific. The largest percentage of the budget is more specific than big spending, because we don't know what big spending means.
Okay.
But we know exactly what largest percentage means. Largest percentage of the budget went, say, the largest percent of my budget goes towards rent.
Yeah.
Salaries all 3 years.
Yeah, sure.
And the smallest percentage of spending was used, smallest percentage of spending was used towards insurance in the given time period. Okay, good. Summary. The 3 pie charts depict the variations of yearly expenditures, it's countable, of some UK schools. It's 1 UK school.
Oh,
A UK school. Variations in yearly expenditures of a UK school. Okay, clearly see that the majority of allocation, no, the majority of the budget, it's just not used this way, that's all. Majority of the budget went to. No need for past perfect here.
okay.
Because you're not comparing 2 past times, you're just talking in general.
Oh, yeah.
Went to teachers' salaries, plural.
Okay.
Whereas is 1 word.
Okay.
Whereas
Minimal budget. Rent.
The smallest amount.
Okay. Went to insurance.
Yes. Okay, Allah. Good. Goes for teachers' salaries. One teacher or multiple teachers?
Or multiple teachers.
So it's got to be S apostrophe, right?
Yeah.
Well, the lowest percentage.
Code 4, not wrong.
The whole thing needs to be in past tense.
Went? Okay.
Yep. The lowest percentage went to insurance. Amar. Good.
Largest.
Percentage. There's a word missing here.
Office spending.
Yep. Teachers and workers' salaries. What are you missing here?
And workers. I mean,
Yep.
for teachers and workers.
Yep, but what's missing at the end of teachers?
I mean, apostrophe?
That's it.
Yeah, but can I do it for both? I meant the salary for the teacher and workers was the largest. The summation of teachers and workers. So I will do possessive for both of them, or for
That's
the
correct.
last?
That's correct.
Okay.
Teachers' salaries and workers' salaries. You could also do a noun phrase, but then just get rid of the S apostrophe in both of them. The largest percentage of spending was for teacher and worker salaries. You can do possessive or get rid of the S's, just noun phrases. However, what's missing here?
Comma?
Yep. The lowest percentage.
Or the minimal?
Not the minimum percentage, the lowest. Minimum means lowest possible.
Minimal with L. Can I use minimal?
It's not going to work here.
No?
Just use a common word, lowest, smallest.
Okay.
Minimum is like, you know, in Quebec, they have minimum speed limits too. They have speed minimums rather. In Ontario, they just tell you the maximum speed on the road, but in some jurisdictions, like in Quebec, they also have a minimum speed. So you can get a ticket if you're going too slow.
In Dubai also, 60.
200. 200 is the minimum speed, right? No. Lowest percentage was for insurance, right?
The camera will get you when you are driving with 60. You will get flash camera.
Is that where
in
on the highway? Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Don't you just love people here on the highway who are going 80 in the left lane?
Yeah.
And just relaxing. They've got their arm on the seat. They're listening to music. They're going 80. Everyone's going 120 next to them.
Yeah, it's not safe. Yeah, it's not safe.
No, they are. We have this expression. They are out to lunch. Not paying attention to the world around them. Okay. And Kelly. Budget expenditures by a specific school in the UK. We use the for UAE, UK, USA.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, comma. It can be clearly seen that. You don't need this in one particular school, or in this particular school. The budget went to salaries. The smallest percentage of spending was used on insurance or used for insurance. School budget went to salaries. I would definitely change this into a complex sentence. What's the easy way to join these two together?
Adding while.
That's it. Good. Okay, let's have a look at a model. I'm just going to copy the image. Okay, the three pie charts show the yearly expenditures of a school in the UK over a 20-year period, focusing on the years 1981, 91, and 2001. Overall, it can clearly be seen that salaries made up the majority of spending in the school over the 20-year period, while spending on insurance was consistently the lowest, even though it grew continuously. Okay. Salaries represented the majority of spending. Teachers' salaries accounted for 40%, here's that language, accounted for 40% of total expenditures in 1981, whereas other workers' salaries made up 28%, totaling 68% of annual expenditures. Okay, so the author's doing some addition here. Okay, 40, 28 is 68.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they're carrying forward that comparison. Together, they were 72% of the school's total spending in 91, but then dropped to 60% in 2001, with teachers' salaries at 45% of total expenditure and other workers' salaries at 15%. Here, I'll put that S in there. Okay, so what did the author do in the first body paragraph?
Discussing about the highest spending of the budget towards salaries.
Yes, the entire paragraph focuses only on salaries. And he added up both teacher and worker salaries and just compared the total percentages over those 3 years.
John, I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can we choose any specific one?
What do you mean?
So instead of talking about teacher salary, can we talk about insurance, for example?
You could, but why? Like if you're talking about a budget and you're doing a presentation,
Mm-hmm.
would it make more sense to start off with the biggest budget item or the smallest?
I think either the smallest or the biggest.
Probably you would start off with the biggest because it's the most significant. And then you'd work your way down the list.
Okay.
That's how most people would cover that kind of information. You start with most prominent and then continue to least significant.
Okay, because sometimes it's confusing me about where should I start, with the biggest budget or the smallest budget?
The biggest, most obvious items.
Okay. Okay.
And that's what this particular author did. Ended with insurance. So the second body paragraph.
So you always study with the more exciting part?
I don't know if I would call it the more exciting part, just the thing that stands out the most. The most, I wouldn't say exciting, I'd say most obvious, most prominent feature.
Okay.
Even in the instructions, it says reporting the main features.
Mm-hmm.
This is a nice expression. Other expenses figured less prominently. It's basically, it's a fixed phrase. In 1981, furniture and equipment is lumped together. Microsoft has a problem with it, doesn't matter. Furniture and equipment was 15% of total spending, as were expenditures on resources, books, for example. However, While the amount of money spent on furniture and equipment dropped to 5% of the yearly budget in 1991, spending on resources jumped to 20%. Conversely, though, this trend reversed itself, and by 2001, 23% of annual spending was spent on furniture and equipment and 9% on resources. Okay, so this is pointing out this is 15%, and then it's 23, whereas this one's 15 and down to 9. So over the 20 years, one went up, the other went down. Final pattern, spending on insurance started at 2% of the total budget in 1981 and grew over the 20-year period to 8%. While it was the smallest budget item every year, it showed the highest level of growth over the period of the study, a 300% increase from 1981 to 2001. Any questions?
The vocabulary here
Mm-hmm.
is any word that we can use specific, such as made up, accounted for.
Yep, expenditures.
Expenditures, yeah.
You can memorize this phrase to introduce. This can be useful anywhere where you're introducing like not the most prominent feature of a graph, but a lesser feature. Mm-hmm. Exactly as this author has done, other expenses figured less prominently.
Yeah.
So we've got expenditures, we've got spending, annual spending is another synonym. Annual spending, expenditures. Spending on whatever. That's it.
Higher levels of growth. Growth, yeah. Yeah. Show the higher. Mm-hmm.
Three complex sentences. These have the patterns that we were talking about at the beginning of class today, the appositives and participial phrases. First one, the three pie charts show the yearly expenditures of a school in the UK over a 20-year period. They focus on the years 1981, 91, and 2001. Kelly, how do we put these together?
The three pie charts show the yearly expenditures of a school in the UK over the 20-year period, focusing on the years 1981.
That's it. Mm-hmm. Very nice. Amar, teachers' salaries accounted for 40% of total expenditures in 1981. Other workers' salaries made up 28%. They totaled 68% of annual expenditures. How do we put this together?
Teachers' salaries accounted for 40% of total expenditure in 1981, comma. Mm-hmm. Other workers' salaries, I can totaling.
We've got a run on, but yes, you're right.
Yeah, totaling. Comma here, comma, totaling. 68 of annual expenditure.
So we just need to.
I'm thinking to leave it as it is.
Can we say and there?
Yeah, you can just put and in here.
Yeah.
Simple connection.
Can I put only comma? I can't join two sentences.
If you only put a comma here, it'll be a run-on, because this is a sentence by itself. This is a sentence by itself. So you'll have a run-on if you replace this with a comma. And then we've got one more. Let's do Zubi. Spending on insurance was the smallest budget item every year. It showed the highest level of growth over the period of the study. The level of growth was a 300% increase from 81 to 2001. Oh, Zui might have walked away. Someone else want to volunteer and do this last one?
Can I?
Sure.
Spending on insurance was the smallest budget item every year, showing the highest level of growth over the period of the study, comma, with the level of growth, study with the growth, with the growth level being 300%.
Where's the best place to put this? What part of the previous sentence does this match up with?
I think after study is
highest level of growth, comma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do I do with this business?
With the growth.
30%, 300% increase from
spending on insurance was the smallest budget item every year, showing the highest level of growth. And what?
A positive.
Showing the
Yeah.
highest level of growth.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so this is an opportunity to use an appositive. Don't go crazy with these structures. It's meant to give you a greater variety of sentence structures. Remember, if you just use one of these structures a single time, if you use like an appositive once, if you use a participial phrase once, if you use passive voice once, that shows ability to use these things.
So we can say that this 300% increasing from, or the ing here could increase or no?
No. Highest level of growth and this are the same thing.
Okay.
Like you could do which was, but this is, but again, when you have this verb to be,
Every year.
it's very often an opportunity to use an appositive because these are the exact same thing. This is the highest level of growth. This and this are exactly the same thing.
No.
That's why the appositive works there. Okay, last part. We're going to, so there's some example answers. We're going to do our outline exercise, and that's what we're going to wrap up with today. Okay, let's start with, oh, Olga's here. There we go. How are you doing, Olga? She might have stepped away again. Okay. All right, let's start with Zubi. Are you there?
Yep.
Okay. We already did the intro. We spent a lot of time on that. Let's just do body paragraph 1.
Okay.
Okay, remember to use these words. Accounted for, made up. What are other synonyms for these two?
Comprised of.
Just comprised.
Okay, comprised.
Comprised of is used a little bit differently, but okay. And then we've got one more.
Constituted.
Constituted. So these are the verbs that you're going to use over and over and over again in writing task 1. Constituted. Okay, Zubi, go ahead.
Majority of the budget spending was on salaries.
Mm-hmm.
On salaries, and the teacher salaries accounted for 40% of the total expenditure in 1981.
Mm-hmm. Good.
And the other worker salaries comprised of 28% to 28%. And then what is the 68%? And then 28% to 68% of the annual expenditure.
Remember, this author decided to lump together the teacher and other worker salaries. So
Okay.
that whole paragraph is talking about them separately and then combining them.
So the teacher salaries accounted for 40% of the total budget, whereas the worker salaries accounted for the 28% of the budget in total, or
so instead of accounted for, I'm going to use comprised.
Comprised of.
Right. You want to switch between these words.
Both of these constituted the 68% of annual expenditure.
Okay. We could say which together
Constituted the 68% of the annual expenditure.
Good. So here, missing the T. Teacher salaries account for 40% of total expenditures, whereas other worker salaries comprise 20%, which together constituted 68%. So this is a good opportunity to get rid of this.
Together constituted, yeah.
Together constituting,
yeah.
right? And you can leave this at the beginning. Okay.
Okay. Teacher 17 Okay, so in year 1991, 72% of the total expenditure went towards teachers' salaries.
Went towards teachers or all salaries?
It is 72%, all salaries.
Right. 72% of the school's total spending went towards salaries. That's how you did it. Went towards salaries.
And then dropped to 60% in 2001.
When?
When?
Put the last part into.
When did you use this? When? Which one? The last line?
Yep. Add that here.
Okay, then when the teacher salaries made up of
Your salaries.
Made up of 45% of
Just
the total
not made up of, just made up.
Made up 45% of total expenditure. Other workers' salaries accounted for 15%.
There we go. Good. Very nice. Amar, body paragraph 2.
Other expenses figured less prominently in 1981. Furniture and equipment comprised 15% of total spending, same as expenditure on resources.
Okay, so how do we...
Which was the same? Yeah.
Good.
However, money spent on furniture and equipment dropped to 5% of yearly budget in 1991.
The yearly budget, 1981. And then how do we connect these?
Whereas spending.
Whereas or while spending. Good.
The trend reversed itself by 2001.
We can say, yep. We can leave the colon in there, actually. Colons you can use for making lists, giving instructions, providing explanations. So technically, we can just leave that colon alone.
Yeah, by 2001, 23% of the annual spending of spending on furniture and equipment.
So we need a verb.
Spending towards annual spending.
We need a verb here.
Spent.
You could say was spent on, was spent on, or you can just say went toward.
Toward furniture and equipment. While 9% went. Okay.
Same thing.
Was spent on resources.
Right. You can choose between these, was spent on, and then in the next one, went toward. Went toward, that's toward is American, towards is British. As you can see, 23% of annual spending was spent on furniture and equipment, while 9% went towards resources. So, back and forth was spent on or went towards. Okay, and the last one. That be. Let's get Kelly to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, go for it. Last one.
The spending on insurance started at 2% of the total budget in 1981. Which grew over the 20-year-old period to 8%.
Good.
The smallest budget item.
So I use this equals here.
Equals, yeah. Smallest. This was the smallest budget item. Every year, shows the highest level of growing,
Of growth.
growth, which constitute
Okay.
300% of 9081. 300%.
We need a preposition.
The high, yeah, which constitute 300%.
One word.
Between. 1981, 2001.
Yes, and
We can also choose constituting 300 between 1981 and 2001.
yeah, but the best way is just to put nothing. It's to use the appositive.
Oh,
The highest level of growth, because 300% is the highest level of growth, so we don't need anything else. You want the simplest possible construction. Okay, that is it for today. I will post the video hopefully early tomorrow, so it'll be cleaned up and it'll just be selections of the parts that we went through. And then I will follow up in terms of the absolute exercises.
And the note is going to be posted today?
Sorry?
The note?
The notes, those will be posted tomorrow as well. If you want these now, I can share these with you right now. I'll just put that in the chat. I'm going to clean these up too. So this document's going to change by tomorrow.
Great.
So okay, so that's in the chat. Just click on the link and grab it before the class ends.
Great. Okay.
Okay, everyone, have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much for today.
My pleasure.
Have a nice weekend.
Take care. Bye-bye. You too.